Okay, so we're talking about building high performance teams. And of course, not everybody here has a team. And so it's also, of course, including all of those of us who work as solopreneurs. So today I want to explore how to create strong, cohesive teams, even if we're working solo, and explore the core principles of high performing teams that can also be applied to solopreneurs, and look at what is psychological safety. And I just want to revisit the pack model. For those of you who have done work with me before, you know what that means. If not, I'll explain it in a minute. And also about the risks of creativity, and then core human needs at work, and some key points. So I hope that piques your interest. Some of these I have covered in previous presentations, so please go back and have a look at those. I think this is my number 23 today. Okay. Yep. All right. So the core principles for high-performing teams are these. So they are, I'm sure you can find more, but for 10 minutes, I think this is enough. The first one is mutual trust. Trust is the foundation for everything. And whether you're working alone or with a team, trust is absolutely crucial. The next thing is open communication, transparent and clear for everybody so that collaboration can thrive. That is one of the core principles. And then shared vision. I don't know if you've ever worked with people who have a very strong vision, but they haven't really shared it with you. So you don't really know what they're working towards and what you're supposed to work with them on. So if you want to be aligned on goals and goals and vision, it's important that you share those and that you get others to see what they can contribute. Because often we can only see a certain thing, but other people have different viewpoints and different perspectives, and they can add to the picture. It's like adding puzzle pieces that you didn't see yet. The other thing is values alignment. And that means that when you have that shared sense of purpose, when you also share things that you hold high in high regard, and depending on the kind of organization that you and people you're working with, that could be, really effective in how you distribute things. So it might be one value. The other one might be making a difference to the world. So there are all these values that we have, and when we know that we're aligned on all of that, it creates that functional culture that really drives performance, but it also creates an alignment that people feel. There's a coherence, there's an alignment that really helps people to build that trust, that communication, and help people to create that functional culture. And that's when people hang around, they don't leave. Okay, so let's start with trust and go a little bit deeper. So trust is all about what? First and foremost, what's the one thing that the brain absolutely horrifically abhors? Unpredictability, uncertainty. The brain is a patterning device that goes, if I know this, I can relax. If this is predictable, I can feel safe. So if we are reliable in a team environment, it means that we're creating that trust. And when we're on top of that, on our confidentialities, when we respect people's boundaries and acknowledge that they have needs. So somebody might have to go on a Thursday afternoon, they might have to leave at 4 o'clock because their child has a performance or a sporting event or something like that, instead of insisting that work needs to be done. We're all adults. We know how to manage ourselves. That's one of the really, really high principles, and I'll talk about that in a minute. I've already mentioned that being transparent about goals, identify timelines. It's no good if you're telling somebody, oh, we need to get this done. I'm just in the middle of organizing something, and somebody came back to me and said, so we need this by this date. And I'm like, no, actually, we need it much earlier than that. And I had missed that, or they hadn't read it. It doesn't matter whose fault it is, but it's about clarifying and saying, this time really matters, so we can all work in alignment and work together and overcome challenges. That's where the open communication is really, really important. And that's where also the consistency comes in. So reliability means you're behaving in a certain way. You're doing things in such a way that people know that you are not going to blow up You're not going to have a temper tantrum. Consistent means you have an appointment, you show up. You do something every week that you said you're going to set out to do. I know a lot of leaders who say, "Oh, I only do whips, work in progress meetings when the person really needs it." Well, some people really need to have a meeting once a week. They don't like it when somebody says, "Oh, you really don't need it today. I'm canceling the meeting." So it's about that communication. It's about finding out what people actually need. Do you need to connect with me more often? Do you need to, in what environment? All of these things matter so much. As I said, I can only fit so much into 10 minutes, but have the conversations with people because that builds the psychological safety that also allows people to step up and bring in new ideas. So they feel safe enough to share those ideas. I have, as you know, I have run God knows how many creative thinking sessions, and I can tell you one thing. If there's no trust, there's no creativity. People hang on to their ideas like they're gold nuggets, especially if the response they get is, "Oh, we've done that before. Yes, but," all of that. So you create a safe environment for new ideas. People will start taking risks. And when they make mistakes and you're managing the mistake with them. And that again, it doesn't matter whether you have a team working with you or you're a solopreneur and you work with consultants or you work with clients. If you are encouraging somebody to make mistakes, small ones that you calculate, and you encourage them to take risks. This is not about saying, "Oh, you go and do make 500 of those, we'll sell them." But it's about saying, "Oh, okay, that's a great idea. How about we make a few samples and see who would be interested in this? We'll test it and then we'll go." So it's about managing that. So it's always a cooperation. And then this is about authenticity. Now I've got these three guys here. The one thing that we do is we push our emotions down in a work context. We're fine. There are two ways in which we can say fine, because it's an acronym, which is feelings inside not expressed, or the other one is fucked up, irrational, neurotic, emotionally unavailable. So when somebody comes to you and says they're fine, they're not talking about what's going on. And if you're surrounded by people working with you who are always fine, start asking questions. Because when whether you're working alone or in a team, that is really what leads to growth and to innovation, that leads to trust, that leads to all of these things that are so important. Okay. I know I keep cycling back, but again, I'm making a point here. Open and transparent communication is absolutely crucial, especially when you're in a hybrid environment or working solo. As I just said, somebody came back to me and said, "Is this the deadline?" And I went, "No, it's actually not. And it's really important that we meet this earlier." It's picking up the phone, it's talking to people, it's about saying, "Hey, could we just have a quick chat about that? This really matters." Because that makes sure that expectations are aligned and goals are being met. I always recommend avoid mind reading. Ask questions, highly underrated tools. We're really good at mind reading, especially when we know somebody really well. We guess their intention, we guess their purpose, but when we start asking questions, the conversation might well go into another direction. But that kind of dialogue they start asking questions back will lead really to wonderful creativity. It will lead to fabulous problem solving, and especially when you invite feedback and ask for input. It becomes a feedback loop, and then the spiral spirals up, not down. And so, especially for solopreneurs, communication is not just external, it's also how you organize your thoughts and how you make sure that you're consistently aligned with your own goals. If you're not communicating with yourself about what matters to you, sit down or get somebody who helps you with that, to align what your values are, what your needs are, what your timelines are, and what your goals are. So then keep records. So that's either for the team environment or for yourself, so that you know, put them into your calendar. This is the date by which done I will have done this. So and it is not a deadline, it's a lifeline. You can always negotiate, but if you've got something in your calendar, it's much more likely that you're going to work towards that than if you're going, "I think at some point I will." So the shared vision is really about keeping everybody focused and motivated. So that's when you share as a solopreneur, you share with other people. You tell people what's going on for you so that you can align towards a common goal. And when you align your vision with your clients or your contractors, you ensure that you're all working in the same towards the same goal. I find that really, really important. Having worked as a solopreneur for the past 28 years, I can tell you when you tell people you're working with what's going on and what's really important to you, people will start supporting you in a totally different way. And that increases commitment, and everybody feels like they're part of something bigger than just the task at hand. And when we've got that sense of purpose, it's just fuel. Okay. So the values alignment is also about is one of the really important ones. So just celebrate. That's the really important one as well. So it's not just about values alignment from a place of, yeah, that goes on the mouse pad and we all read it. No, but it's about really celebrating it in real life. Okay. So that creates the cohesion and that creates the momentum. Now, the one really important part of this is let's treat people like adults. I have met this, I've introduced the pack model before. So if that's new to you, have a look back. I think it's in one of the first ones. And it's about the fact that we talk to people in certain ways. So the old leadership model was to treat people like children. So leaders were in parent mode and they would talk down at people. And the people who were the followers, they were not called team members yet, they were the followers, they would act like children, which is why they would ask for permission, they would shy away from taking risks, they wouldn't step out of the box, and they would just comply. And I can tell you quite honestly, when somebody just works in the box that you think you have made for them where they should fit, you're not getting your money's worth. They're not going to contribute to the ability and to the value that they can. And that goes for contractors, that goes for anybody, clients who support, all of that. So just make sure that when you talk to somebody, look them eye to eye. The trick to test how you're seeing somebody is always the one where you close your eyes and you imagine someone. Do you imagine them in life size, larger than life or smaller than life? If they're life size, they're likely adults in your mind. If they're larger than life, you're probably a child. And if you visualize somebody smaller than life, you're in parent position. So have a look at that, because that will really make a big difference to how your team also sees you. Now, just very quickly on language, these are the words that really trigger people since we're talking about parenting. You should, you have, you must, you ought to, you mustn't, I need you to. That's parental language. This is called modal operators of necessity. You use words like that, constructions like that, you've automatically put yourself into a parent position. So my recommendation would be to avoid those. And how about I give you some other alternatives? How about you could? What are your thoughts? You ask questions. If you ask somebody to do something, you say, would you please? Or how about you? Or I wonder if you've got considered when you ask somebody's opinion. There are all these wonderful sentence structures that invite people to do their own thinking. Because we all have two core needs as adults, autonomy and competence. And to be able to hear somebody acknowledge that really, really makes a big difference. And that also works, of course, as a solopreneur when you support your contractors, your freelancers, and your clients to feel both autonomous and competent in their roles. Once again, stronger sense of engagement and much higher productivity. So creativity is all about risk-taking, which I keep repeating, creative thinking, growth mindset, and being proactive rather than reactive. So please go and look for solutions before the problem has actually become a big one. You don't need the burst pipe to know that something is fragile in order to, if the tap is leaking, something might not work so well. Go and have a look at that. If you haven't done this yet, have a look at that. I did a presentation on this as well. This is the situation leadership model, which is all about how you can empower people to be autonomous and competent. And we are at this point, I'm just really interested in number 3. So that's the supporting one, because this is the time when people are already familiar with what you're doing. They know what you're doing, but they know it so well that they now want to take risks and they want to take extra steps and maybe change things around. You help them take risks, you help them step up. That's when you create innovative solutions. This is when the company grows. This is where also you create your ability to make yourself redundant but not irrelevant, and where you create new leaders. So that is your goal as a leader. If you don't do anything else, that's the most important thing. So the key points, just to reiterate: trust, communication, shared vision, and values are the 4 pillars. Use language that empowers people. Make sure you remember that they're adults. Encourage them to think out of the box, even if it's risky. But brainstorming, and that's last week's session, is a brainstorming. Support people in becoming competent. It increases their resilience. They become much better contributors. And you never know, if you want to sell the business, you might have somebody who's your successor. You can sell along with the business. And remember to connect and celebrate non-related work events. Birthday cake is optional. Generally, if you work with people, even if you have gone, I generally send my contractors something for their birthday because it's nice to acknowledge it. And then remember, creating new leaders is what really matters. That's how we move forward. That's how we learn. This is how we evolve, not just in an organization, not just as an individual, but as a society. And next week, I'm going to talk about thriving in remote and hybrid environments, because that's the next step. Your team may not always be in front of you. You may just be somewhere else. And if you'd like me to work with you on any of these questions, you know where to find me. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for that.